Jeff Shearer is synonymous with sports. For nearly 25 years, he zipped from high schools to colleges around Alabama to bring you the best highlights from as many athletes as he could find. Well, now he works at Auburn University, still covering sports, still telling athlete stories, and still learning. There's still more out there to learn. That's where we caught up with him. Between reporting on the students there and teaching them, he took a little time to get pretty real with us and share what his time at WSFA 12 News meant to him. I'm Bethany Davis, and this is Being Real.
Sponsored by Bryan Jewelry.
But when you call me, I'll answer. And if you need someone to hold your hand, when you're lonely, I'll be there. I will give you everything I am.
Promise your everything with a diamond from Bryan Jewelry.
So Channel 12 was the station that we watched all the time. And I spent a lot of time with my grandmother in her house. And I can remember being somewhat young. I'm going to say, not to age anybody, but maybe middle schoolish age. And sitting in on my grandma's couch, and she leaned over and she says, "You know, I really like this new sports guy we got."
Love it.
And it was
that.
you.
That's funny.
I thought I like him too. But I didn't know really exactly what I was talking about. What year was that? What year
I
was
started
that?
in 1991, and I'm in all my fields because yesterday, as we record this, was 34 years to the day of my first day on the air.
Oh,
so
wow.
Things like that you don't forget. April 24th, 1991, my first day on the air, and Phil Snow comes up with this plan to have me on the set, and he's out covering something at Patterson Field, some kind of baseball event. And we go through this plan, we go downstairs to talk to the director, Arlen Carr, and I can hear it like it happened yesterday. And Phil's saying, "Arlen Carlum, Arlen Carlum," and he's like looking for Arlen, and we find Arlen, and we explain, okay, Jeff's gonna be on the set, and he's gonna pitch it out to me, and I'm gonna introduce him and pitch it back and everything. And Phil came up with this great plan, and everything worked except for one important thing. In my nervousness, I forgot to put my microphone on.
Oh, no.
So I guess we start with Phil at Patterson Field, and now let's send it back to the station and let's meet our new sports reporter, Jeff Shearer. And you hear, wah, wah, because the mic is like down here somewhere.
There's no easy way to grab it.
It's so bad, and Bob House, why don't you clip your mic on and tell us something? So anyway, you could only go up from there. But that was 34 years ago yesterday.
34 years ago. So yeah, I probably was about middle school
Right.
age, not to age anybody. But that doesn't seem, I mean, to me, that memory to me seems like it was just a few years ago.
I have, just in the last couple months, I've had people come up to me and I think, oh, this person is about my age. And they'll say, "I watched you growing up." And I'm like, "No, you didn't. We're the same age."
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
I guess, yeah, the years can get away from you, but I enjoyed almost 25 years at Channel 12 and have been here at Auburn now about 9.5.
Wow, I didn't realize it had been that long. But this is not your home area. This is not where you're from. How did you end up here?
In the South?
In the South, in Alabama at Channel 12.
Born in Ashland, Ohio, and then in 7th grade I moved to the Denver, Colorado area. So junior high, high school, and college in Colorado, at the University of Colorado. Graduated, and it took me 7 months to find my first job in television. So I'm mowing yards and working at UPS and doing anything to pay the bills. And finally I get an opportunity in Scottsbluff, Nebraska as the sports director at one of the smallest stations in the country. It was part of the Cheyenne market. But Cheyenne is like a real city, and it's a different state away. If Scottsbluff were freestanding and on its own, it truly would have been the smallest market in the country, but it was part of the Cheyenne market for reasons unknown. So, but I was so thankful to have that and worked there for 10 months. I talk about my first day at Channel 12 being bad. Somehow my first day in Scottsbluff was even worse because it was the January 1, the day of the college football bowl games, and I had been an intern at a station in Denver for a long time, and I saw this polished anchor, and he had a big team of people helping him. It wasn't like that in Scottsbluff. You're a one-man band, one-person show, and you're learning, you're putting in your own chyrons and everything, and editing, and I'm a nervous wreck. And I get out there, and you also run your own teleprompter with a foot pedal, which is fine. And so this big Denver anchor, he would write his leads, the part where he's on camera. He would type those into the teleprompter, and then when he would be off camera voicing over highlights, he would write ad-lib highlights, and he'd have a shot sheet that he would refer to. I thought, okay, I'm going to do it like that, which worked out great until it's time to be back on camera the second time, and I had forgot to advance the foot pedal.
Oh,
so
no.
now I'm kicking the foot pedal. I'm on camera. My eyes look like this, deer in the headlights, and I'm like slowly scrolling up. It was just a debacle, and the Bob Howell of that station was a guy named Jerry DeShong. He worked there almost 50 years. He was off that day because it was a holiday. He comes in the next day, and I think, I'm fired. It was that bad. It was terrible. Thankfully, there was no YouTube, or I could have gone viral. And he said, I thought you did a pretty good job last night. And I'm like, you must have been watching the other station. And he said, one piece of advice, try to avoid that dead air. So for the next 27 years of my TV career, I didn't stop talking. I've tried to avoid that dead air because I forgot to advance the foot pedal to get to my next page of script. So
That foot pedal, that'll get you
it'll
too.
get you every
can't,
time.
Yeah, there's no
Every
advanced
time.
button that you can hit with your foot.
So worked there 10 months and had an opportunity to go from Market 198 to Market 40 in Salt Lake City, Utah at KSL, which is a kind of a powerhouse like the WSFA of that market. And to do that, I had to go, I was on air in Scottsbluff. I was more behind the scenes, a sports producer at KSL in Salt Lake City. But they would let me do packages, and they would let me fill an anchor when on Christmas Eve when nobody else wanted to be there. And I'd say, hey, what if we increase our coverage of high school sports? They marketed themselves as, we have the education specialist is this gentleman, and then the environmental specialist is this woman. And I said, what if I became the prep sports specialist? And they went for that. And so they allowed me to have a niche of covering high school sports, and I was only 23, 24 years old. And that was a great opportunity to have an on-air role in addition to my behind-the-scenes opportunity. So worked there a year and a half, and then came to WSFA in April of 1991. My wife Rhonda and I had been married less than a year, and we'd never been to the South really before. And I said, okay, we'll be there 2 or 3 years and go somewhere else, and we stayed almost 25.
And here you are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually, I mean, technically, I know you're in Auburn now, but you really didn't ever leave.
Well, we have enjoyed thoroughly. It was a blessing to us to be part of the Montgomery community for more than 25 years, and had a great church. Our daughters were both part of the Montgomery public school system, and that prepared them for the success that they're enjoying in their academic and professional lives, and we couldn't speak any more highly of our time in Montgomery.
We're going to come back and talk about your family in just a few minutes, but first I think it's really interesting how all of your previous jobs sort of set you up for exactly what you became known for at Channel 12. Number one, you did it all yourself. I watched you do it all yourself for a lot of years. And number two, you are responsible for what might be our most popular Friday night show, Friday Night Football Fever. I mean, so what a way to set up for what turned out to be an incredible legacy here.
It was great preparation, that time in Scottsbluff when you're running around and on a Friday night and you're driving to different cities and you're covering 8-man football at a place called Minutair, which is 12 miles from Scottsbluff, and it was exactly what the Fever became. But I didn't do it myself. And behind our camera over here are Jeff Harrison and Vince Hodges, and they represent an army of other folks behind the scenes who made it happen. But I guess my shining moment, I once covered 7 high school football games in one night in Montgomery. And it was a logistical, a lot of them were out Vaughan Road, a lot of them are schools that no longer exist. But to get to 7 places at one night, and I didn't stay long at any of them. Some of the highlights weren't great. Here's a 3-yard gain, and they went on to win 21-14. But it it was a station-wide commitment. I think the past, the present, and the future of local news is hyper-local, right? And nothing says more hyper-local than high school football coverage, because you've got your cheerleaders and your band and your dance team and the football team and moms and dads selling in the concession stand. Everybody working together, and that effort that the station put into it was always appreciated and acknowledged, and it was great to see it. And people to this day will talk to me about it.
Oh, listen. So not only did I rush home from my own high school football games to turn on the Fever, just to see if we could catch a little glimpse of Opelika High School football, but then when I came to Channel 12, I spent 5.5 years on that night side shift. I lived for Friday nights in the fall. Those were the most fun experiences I think I can remember. Number one, because there really wasn't a whole lot to do. It shortened our 10 o'clock newscast, so we really didn't have we didn't really have to do a whole lot to get ready for the 10 o'clock newscast part. So we were all able to get things done and then kind of hang out. We had a great crew, by the way, that worked at Channel 12 in the newsroom, so we spent a lot of time hanging out. But then something about that 9:30 hour, everything explodes at 9:30. And then you're so busy, you can't figure out what to do first or next or last or what just doesn't get done, which a lot of times there were things that didn't get done. But those are some of my favorite memories. I was a producer then, and I would watch you. I think what must have happened, because I would sit in the control room, and we had a newsroom, a camera in the newsroom, so I could see from the control room what was happening in the newsroom, chaos. I could see you running back and forth in front of the bridge a couple of times, and then within seconds, you would be downstairs on another floor.
Right.
Did you jump from the top stair to the bottom stair on Friday nights?
I got down there quickly, but I learned early on in the most painful of fashion, do not be running to be on, no matter when that red light's going to be on, even if it's 12 seconds, you're way better off walking briskly than you are running. Because if you're out of breath, you are in trouble in this business.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
true.
learned that the hard way early, and I tried to not duplicate that anymore.
But I don't ever remember you showing up late. You were always there. Somehow, even
You got to be
covering
there when that red
7
light is
different
on.
games,
Yes,
somehow you always made it back. You had your video at least somewhat edited.
That's right. That's right.
Scripts kind of written.
That's the other thing. If you're not in the chair when the light goes on, you're not going to last very long. So you're not going to serve viewers, and so you want to push it as much as you can to get as much in there and to get that extra highlight and get that soundbite and get that final score. But you also want to be ready to go when it's time to go.
I mean, what great experience that it was. It was a great experience for me. It was fun. Not just to watch the chaos and to be a part of the chaos, but it taught me a lot of lessons. You taught me a lot of lessons through that experience of, number one, what it means to work hard, to take responsibility for your work, because I knew when you showed up in front of that camera that you had ownership in every single part of that show from start to finish. It taught me a lot about time management. I'm still working on that one, by the way.
We all are. We all are.
But just what great lessons, what seems like just such a fun, laid back, fun to watch something, really instilled a lot of values in me that I've carried with over the last 25 years. What were some of the takeaways for you from creating a show like Friday Night Football Fever from scratch?
Well, early on, in 1991, our first fall there, we went to the news director and said, hey, can we get a few more extra minutes for sports on Friday night? And Jeff Harrison was a big part of that, because he was willing to give up his Friday night at home to go out and shoot games in the Wiregrass, the area where he lived, and that gave us credibility in the station and in the community that, hey, if I watch this newscast, I might see Zion Chapel or Charles Henderson or Pike Liberal, and the places where Channel 12 has had that strong signal and has been a market leader since the 1950s, we were there on a Friday night. So then the following year, 1992 is when we launched Friday Night Football Fever, and Jerome Hand, who was a sports reporter at the time, gets the credit for coming up with that name, and it just grew from there. We went from covering 8 games to 14, we ended up getting 25 or more And then when Raycom became the owner of the station, and that broadened our reach even further, because then we could get games from Birmingham if we had teams playing there, or we could get some East Alabama stuff from WTVM in Columbus. And we also had good relationships with our NBC affiliates in Mobile when teams would be down there. So we were able, if a team from Fever Country, as we called it, was playing anywhere in the state a big game, we would at least make an effort to try and have coverage of that.
But when you call me, I'll answer. And if you need someone to hold your hand, when you're lonely, I'll be there. I will give you everything I have.
Promise your everything with a diamond from Bryan Jewelry.
I loved when I was in San Antonio at the Final Four a couple weeks ago, seeing not one but two, the Channel 12 sports team, both there with Rosie and Davis. That's how WSFA built its reputation, by being where the story is. So I love that Channel 12 made that investment to send its sports team 600 miles away or more to San Antonio, Texas to cover a big story.
Yeah.
That's how WSFA became the market leader that it's been for 70 years. And so I hope that that never goes away. And I know I'm not the person who has to make those decisions and those funding and resource decisions, but some things are worth investing in. And when there's a big story, Channel 12's there. And your viewers expect that. And Channel 12 has delivered it for 7 decades.
There's a little something about when you left. Of course, you deserved a huge bash that we threw to say goodbye and to send you off to Auburn. You're the only one I've ever known, and we've done this a number of times for people who've been around for a long time. We've thrown them big parties as they walk out the door. You're the only one that I've ever known who took that party for you and made it about everybody else.
Well,
Instead of receiving gifts, you brought a gift for almost everybody in that room.
well, I received them also, and our late great news director Scott Duff was so kind and gracious to me in allowing that event to happen, and I certainly appreciated it. But there were people that I wanted to personally thank, and Jeff Harrison was one of them, and Brooke Bailey is another, because for years and years and years, she was the producer on Friday Night Football Fever, and I don't know how she did it to this day. She kept 15 plates in the air, and it took so much off of my shoulders, and I appreciated that and wanted to acknowledge it. Doug Gooden, like Jeff, he jumped in to the Friday Night Football Fever and would go shoot 5 games by himself and edit them, and he'd have them all done with shot sheets by 9:30, and he and I went on a bunch of bull trips together. Jeff and I we did live shots at the Iron Bowl from 1993 to 2015, so 23 years in a row. Now it's like, oh, you went live, no big deal, because you can just do it with a live view and an internet.
Right.
But in 1993, to go over here to Jordan-Hare Stadium and to do a microwave signal and get it back on the air, or the station had done that for a while, but he figured out a way to get us live from Legion Field in Birmingham, where we're using our NBC affiliate there and bouncing it off them and going up on the satellite. To this day, I don't know how he did it, but year after year after year, he was there. And I think that mattered to the people who couldn't be at the game, who wanted to get a report from their local station.
I think it did. Okay, so let's talk about this
Yes.
right here. Since we're
Okay.
talking about you're going away
Yes.
and you're
So
leaving,
this
is a pretty cool
This
little
is a
something.
full circle moment for me, because this series that you're doing is in conjunction with the station's 70th anniversary. So 20 years ago, I did something similar. I visited with the 4 sports directors who preceded me, and I got to meet the person who had my job 50 years before
That's
me.
pretty cool.
It was awesome. His name is Leroy Paul. I think he would be in his mid-90s. I think he is still with us. If he's passed away, I missed it. But I got to meet him. He was the first sports director. And then a guy named Earl Hutto for 2 years. And Earl Hutto, why were you only there 2 years? Well, he did the Auburn Football Review, and so did Leroy Paul before him. But Earl Hutto made $75 doing the Auburn Football Review, which was probably a decent amount of money in 1963, but he thought it was worth more than that. He asked for 100, and the station manager said no, so he left. He left over a salary dispute in 1963 because he wanted $25 more to do the Auburn Football Review. And he ended up becoming a congressman from the Florida Panhandle and worked in broadcasting in Pensacola. But it was just fascinating to meet them. And then Carl Stevens, and then Phil Snow, and then myself. So when I left the station, my brother at the time worked at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, and in these Russian nesting dolls, there would be these street vendors who would make these and sell these. So I said, hey, could you make, if I send you pictures, can you get these made? And funny story, there was supposed to be one set of these with 5 people in them, or maybe 6, I guess. And lost in translation, the artist made 6 of these. So I had 6 sets of these. So I was able to give them to everybody. But here's a little Channel 12 history lesson. So we have Stephen Gunter here, who succeeded me. Now we need a Rosie Langelo doll.
We sure.
And I don't know what year she took over sports director, somewhere in the last 4 or 5 years. But we definitely need a Rosie doll. So before Stephen, there's me. And I thought they did a splendid job capturing both of my chins. So on the back are the years you are the sports director. So
very
2003
cool.
to 2015. And then, so before me was Phil Snow, who had by far the longest run, which was 75 to 2002. That wasn't that wasn't his whole time at the station. He started at the station in 1964.
That was just
so he
his
worked
time.
time as sports director.
That's incredible.
And then before Phil was Carl Stevens, who is a station legend and was the PA announcer here at Auburn football before Rick Smith. The official Jordan-Hare Stadium time is 3:05. Carl Stevens was the sports director from 1963 to 1975. And then Earl, who wanted $25 more to do the Auburn Football Review from 61 to 63. And the very first sports director was Leroy Paul from 54 to 61.
That is really cool.
So talking to this gentleman was just fascinating. And he said, he came to the station one night. He brought all these pictures of these old black and white photos of contests that they had. And he said, and I copy him 20 years later, he said, not a week goes by that we don't look back on our time at WSFA with the greatest of fondness. And that's how I feel. I feel just like Leroy Paul felt. But he was there when the history, he said, he came back in the newsroom one night after going home for dinner, and it was the day of the Montgomery bus boycott started. It was, the station was there for history and a front row seat to it, and covered it and shared it with the community and really with the world. Think about what this gentleman and his peers at the time, what they covered and what that created for 70 years later for those of us who have worked there.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my, those are the
that
Russian nesting dolls history lesson of WSFA.
It's pretty neat though to see all of those faces, those names, those years. You're right, when you think about what happened, and particularly in Montgomery, Alabama, in correlation with those years. Boy, we have covered some really meaningful moments.
No doubt. And Carl Stevens was the anchor of the Auburn Football Review, and he would say, well, Coach Jordan, it was a big day for Auburn yesterday at Tennessee against the Volunteers. And Shug would lean over and say, well, you're so right, Carl. And he would, you're so right, Carl became a catchphrase to the point that there you can still, on an old cars, find bumper stickers that say, you're so right, Carl. And Auburn, every once in a while, will have a pop-up vintage shop where we'll sell the old designs from the 70s and 80s. And I saw a "You're so right, Carl" bumper sticker, or a button, I should say, a year or two ago, and I had to have it just because of the station's connection to that. You're so right, Carl. But I didn't know until I met Leroy Paul and Earl Hutto that he said the same thing to them, because he was the coach when this show started in the mid-50s. But hearing the effort that it took to produce a coach's show in 1955, when you're carrying your wooden tripod and your film camera up to the top of the stadium, and then you have to process all that film and edit it and get it on the air the next day, it made the Fever sound like a walk in the park compared to what these pioneers did with the technology they had back in their time. So when I came to Channel 12 in 1991, I benefited from everyone who had been there before. It's Phil Snow and Carl Stevens and these other two folks, because they're the ones who made that station the market leader. I got to ride in on their coattails.
Absolutely.
And then so it's our job and it's your job to pass that down for the next people who come.
How did you get to the point where you felt comfortable or confident in your interview skills,
Sure.
in your storytelling skills, to tell the story, to tell someone else's story
Right.
in a way that accurately, fairly, in the way it deserves to be told?
I had great mentors. I don't think I mentioned it by name, but I had a gentleman I worked with in Salt Lake City named Steve Cyphers, who was just a phenomenal storyteller, and I got to watch how he did it. So I think that's how it works for most of us. Hey, you have a great mentor, and then you just learn by doing it over and over again. And sometimes you learn by what not to do. And like, hey, I messed that up. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do it this way this time. And then I learned from Phil Snow, who was just a tremendous writer, one of the better broadcast writers that I've ever encountered. And just watching how he would use an economy of words, just a few words to say these eloquent things. And so learning from mentors is huge, and then doing it over and over and over again. There's no shortcuts, right? For most of us.
Yeah.
Some people are born or just naturals. That wasn't me, and that's not most of us. Most of us, you got that refining process that comes over time and doing it over and over and over again.
When you talk to your girls, what do you tell them about your time at Channel 12, or what do they remember about your time?
I think they remember being young and answering. I remember Sarah, who's our oldest. She was in second grade in the early years of the fever, probably maybe 10 years in. And I would say, call the fever hotline, 1-800-264-9732. I've got a straight A second grader ready to take your call. And she would be up there at age 9 or 10 or whatever, 8, saying, WSFA, this is Sarah. And she would come back up, and she had written down.
I love
and then you probably took over that role at some point. But so they're tied up in what they're doing right now, so we don't reminisce a ton. But when they do, the memories are funny, and they're like Leroy Paul said, he remembers them with the greatest of fondness.
Yeah.
Fond and fun.
Yeah. Well, that is just exactly how we would describe you. The greatest of fondness and a whole lot of fun,
Thank you.
too, which is, it's very unique. We don't find that in a lot of people, someone that is as good-hearted and just pure goodness as you are, and still a whole lot of fun.
Well, I'm thankful for my association with Channel 12. I benefited from it to this day, and it's been a blessing in my life.
Jeff Shearer is one of a kind. Anyone who knows him knows his kindness sets him apart as a journalist, as a dad and granddad, and as a coworker and friend. And that's what makes him real.